Auburn officials say the facility is the largest single gift ever given to the university by living persons. The buildings and grounds will primarily be used by Auburn forestry students in the summer. In the past, forestry students have had to travel over the state to get the required practical experience. Now, students and their instructors will stay here for 1 quarter of study. Mrs. Thelma Dixon named the auditorium for her late husband Charles in honor of his work as a forest industrialist. Solon Dixon restored the old Dixon home, which will serve as a museum, library, and reception area for guests. On hand for today's dedication were Governor Fob James, local and state officials, agricultural officials, representatives of Auburn University. Those present praised the Dixons for their donation and their hard work in forestry and conservation. Both Mrs. Thelma Dixon and her brother-in-law Solon were also honored with a legislative resolution. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
One of the groups taking part in the hearings represents 13 electricity-guzzling big industries in the state. Their attorney, Jim Brooks, questioned Alabama Power's Rate and Regulatory Matters manager about the difference in base rates for residential and industrial customers. Power company official John Burks didn't deny an allegation of imbalance in the rates, but said all current rates are approved by the PSC. If the industrial group gets its way, residential rates could go up, balancing the burden placed on each type of power customer. Arguing for the power company yesterday, money market expert Dr. Eugene Brigham told the commission he thought the power company needs at least a 16.3% rate of return on its equity. The power company currently claims a 6.6% rate of return. Beginning tomorrow, the PSC will look at the question of incorporating special rates for certain groups of customers, like those on fixed incomes. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
That the company did not burn it.
Yeah, you put a hurting on a bike, don't you?
Yeah. I'm the only person in the world that jumps with a motorcycle and outweighs it by 60 pounds anyway.
You use good equipment, huh?
That's right. Yeah, I use a 500cc Yamaha, and like I say, I outweigh the motorcycle. It's like a newspaper writer in Denver, Colorado said last year. He said it's not quite the same, but he said it's like a jockey outweighing his horse.
Conditions vary from jump to jump, from city to city, don't they? How do you control that?
Well, you just spend a whole week there trying to get used to the environment, for one thing, and then I'd have to keep my bike in tip-top shape for each time, and sometimes we have to use a different tire for a different track or something. But like out here at Montgomery International Speedway, we have plenty of room out here, so I don't hope to encounter any problems other than dew on the ramps or something like that.
Oh, the approach is one of the keys.
That's the main thing, is my size is getting the speed up to do the jump, and then making sure that the surface that you're landing on isn't wet or the one you're taking off of. So this time of year, that's one of the problems that we encounter is dew on the wood.
Then it becomes a mathematical equation. You get the mass moving fast enough. And
That's right.
Jump, huh?
That's right. This is all ballistics math. It's like pointing a gun and firing it off. I mean, I'm like a big old lead bullet going through the air.
and sometimes the wife is along too. Linda, how did you get involved in this?
Well, I did not intend to be no daredevil, believe me. Ed was talking to a promoter on the phone, and he had to do an hour show for Canada Dry in 1978. And I heard Ed say, they was talking about different acts that they could do and stuff. And Ed said, I think a passenger jump would be good. I couldn't hear what the promoter said. And the next thing I know, I turn around and look at Ed, and he gets this little grin on his face. When he has that, I know I'm in trouble. And he said, yeah, I know someone will ride behind me. And I said, I'm not going to do it. And Ed said, just do it one time. That's all I asked, Linda. So I said, okay, if we practice. 3 months later, we were doing the passenger jump in front of a crowd, and we'd never practiced.
Oh, my.
We did the passenger jump. The first time we did it was on our 7th wedding anniversary.
Do you experience fear through all this?
Yes, I usually scream the whole way across.
Next spring, we're doing some of the pre-formalities of it right now. I want to jump from one World Trade Tower to the other in New York City.
Oh
and that'll be on closed circuit TV, and that's what we're doing the the litigation right now.
I hope you have a long approach.
Just so that it's it's 110 stories down. It's a quarter mile straight down, or the jump will be 150 feet across. So it'll be the jump to end all jumps. Like I say, it'll end my career one way or the other.
That's what they're doing right now. That's really what they're looking for is 5 they can put in there and go with. And they haven't decided on anybody, but they got some good people with some good experience that have gotten some good playing time the last couple of years, and so they'll just have to decide on who they want to go with and then teach them the system. I think they'll be all right.
Tell me the truth, has the coach been coaching from the hospital?
Hasn't done much coaching from the hospital. He's only missed a couple of days though, and I think he'll be back out there tomorrow. So they haven't missed him too bad so far.
This is the Montgomery Census Office on Commerce Street. All the census forms for 15 counties come here to be processed. That's about 250,000 homes. When the forms arrive, workers sort them according to enumeration districts. There are 800 districts in the 15-county area. After that, each district is broken down into 5 more sections for filing. Eventually, workers file the forms according to serial numbers. Census takers can find out who neglected to turn in a form by determining which serial numbers are missing. Before you can be checked off the master address list, editors check your form to be certain you completed all questions accurately. This worker shows how that's done using a dummy form. We weren't allowed to see any completed forms because the Census Department keeps all answers confidential. In 2 weeks, some 400 field workers will begin making calls on citizens who didn't turn in their forms. When their work is done, all answers will go to an office in Indiana, where all the forms in the nation will be processed and results compiled. By that time, the 600 Montgomery workers will have put themselves out of business. With all forms completed, sorted, filed, checked, and edited, the Montgomery office should be closed by August 8th. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Mike, you got your speech all set for tonight?
I don't know, but I'll probably just ad lib. Get up there.
Who's going to be, Coach Bryant's not going to be there. Who's going to be there from the staff, do you know?
Coach Mal Moore's coming, and so is Coach D. Powell, the offensive line coach and the offensive coordinator. So,
which brings up a good point. You guys, 4 or 5 of you off the offensive line will be gone. How about rebuilding the line? What's the prospect?
Well, that's right. That's what they're doing right now. That's really what they're looking for is 5 they can put in there and go with, and they haven't decided on anybody, but they got some good people with some good experience that have gotten some good playing time the last couple of years, and so they'll just have to decide on who they want to go with and then teach them the system. I think they'll be all right.
Tell me the truth, has the coach been coaching from the hospital?
Hasn't done much coaching from the hospital. He's only missed a couple of days though, and I think he'll be back out there tomorrow, so they haven't missed him too bad so far.
When you went to Alabama, you had practically no encouragement. You were 185 pounds, not particularly fast, and yet you went and walked on. What made you think you could play football at Alabama? Alabama of all places.
Well, I don't know that I was so sure that I could play. I guess I believed deep down I could, but the main thing is I just wanted to play some more. I just loved the game, and I wanted to try it again and to keep playing, and I guess that's the thing that that really drove me on to go ahead and try it.
The figures are so lifelike you'd expect one to speak at any moment, but the wax figures stand as a great tribute to one of the world's most famous paintings, The Last Supper. It took a Kentucky man more than 10 years to create the life-size three-dimensional reproduction now owned by the Walter Wanis family of Montgomery. Each figure took about 10 months to create, and all have been painstakingly reproduced down to the last detail. The figures have human hair, eyebrows, and lashes sculpted into the wax one strand at a time. The folded hands of John the Disciple are carved out of one single piece of wax. But what seems to impress visitors the most are the eyes of Christ. Observers say they're the most visually stunning of all the figures. Symbolism abounds in the sculptured display. Christ's hands, one turned up and one turned down, symbolize the receiving of power from God and spreading it to the earth below. No candle in the candle holder means no other light is needed in the presence of Christ. Judas, with his money bag, has just spilled the salt container, which nowadays signifies bad luck. The exhibit, which has toured the United States and Canada, is a beautiful work of art, but it's obviously more stunning and impressive during the Easter season. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
We have a serious problem in the state of Alabama and the nation with arson, and we're attempting to pool our resources by involving all state agencies and law enforcement or in fire chiefs or fire departments and whatever to consolidate these people and pull together 27 to 30 people who can become involved and deal with this problem with us.
The Hermann Goering exhibit contains many gifts and personal items of the Nazi Reich Marshal.
Under Adolf Hitler, Goering created the Gestapo and was in charge of building Germany's Air Force, the Luftwaffe. This commemorative gold plate presented to Goering in the Christmas of 1939 now belongs to the Center for Military History in Washington, D.C. The plate and other items are valued at more than $1 million, so extra security measures are provided at each stop in the exhibit's cross-country tour. At the Army Aviation Museum at Fort Rucker, Assistant Curator James Craig says there's a great deal of interest in the Nazi artifacts, mainly from curiosity. One interesting point about the exhibit, a plaque called The Spoils of War, briefly outlines the historical significance of World War II, but never passes judgment on the Third Reich, leaving that decision for future generations. Hermann Goering took his own life with cyanide 2 hours before he was scheduled to be hanged, the death sentence handed down in the Nuremberg war trials. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News, Fort Rucker.
For many, the increase in interest rates is causing a shadow to fall on their dream of owning a home. And this is why. Rising inflation, construction costs, and mortgage interest rates are discouraging factors that prospective buyers face in investing in a new home. And all the while, the underlying demand for home ownership is strong and growing stronger. While it's no secret that the money market is tight, a national real estate spokesman said that sales remain at a high level.
While sales may have come down nationally from a 4 million rate down to 3 million in February of this year, one can turn those figures around and say that sales are holding up to 75% of what they were before. In fact, at the annual rate we have now, there are only 3 years in the history of the United States that we had higher sales. In fact, if you look at the economics of it, in terms of where mortgage interest rates are likely to be 12 months from now, and where the value of homes are likely to be 12 months from now, it is economically wise for people to buy homes now instead of waiting until 12 months from now.
The fact is that the average monthly payment of a median-priced home has increased significantly for the past 12 months. And it's not so much the cost of the house that's the problem, but the cost of buying it. As for the price of housing itself, only modest increases are expected this year. So if you're thinking about buying a house, real estate people say you may be better off doing it now than waiting. This is Coping, and I'm Ivy Berman.
Well, the holdup is cash flow. We just finished the first quarter, and as April money comes in, and we're concerned about the sales tax. April should be a good month with respect to income tax, and I hope that and anticipate that the second quarter pay raise can be made in late April.
The governor met with education experts, and they told him teachers need help. The basic skills teams reported to James what they have found after looking at local systems statewide. The team's coordinator, Ted Spears, says for the most part, teachers are doing their jobs well.
In most cases, we found that the teachers had the right attitude. They just needed a little more assistance and help in going about this. And obviously, in the high school areas, that they're probably trying to do too much, and that they need to concentrate on those things that they can do well and then worry about those other items later.
The teams have been at work since last October. Bob Lager, the governor's education advisor, says now they'll take the information gathered and use it to determine the status of education in the state.
The skills teams are having a tremendous impact in the state. We need to see what we've done this year, how it's been helpful by talking to the people who are using the skills teams, and then make plans for next year to make the program even more potent.
Lager says the basic skills teams are included in the governor's war on illiteracy plans for next year's budget. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Governor's Mansion.
Newborn animals like ducks, rabbits, and these baby chicks are warm, cute, and as cuddly as can be, but they weren't meant to be Easter gifts, especially for children. Youngsters who don't know better sometimes unknowingly torture the fragile animals by literally squeezing or petting them to death. And these cute little chicks don't stay this fluffy and cute forever. They grow up and become not so cuddly chickens. During the Easter season, these baby animals are sometimes offered for sale or given away to unsuspecting parents who want to surprise their child on Easter. But besides being a bad gift, the sale of these small animals is against the law.
The Alabama law prohibits the sale or giveaway of baby chicks, rabbits, and ducklings as pets or novelties. And further, they are fragile creatures. They require more care than any ordinary pet, and they're contact disease very easily. I would say that the trauma experienced by a child or infant in the handling of these type animals when they're injured or die as a result of handling make them highly undesirable as pets.
So if you were planning to give your child a baby rabbit, duck, or chick this Easter, think twice about the possible consequences. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Opinion should be one of the things that should be greatly considered in this measure. So those areas, and not one complaint has ever been registered. An additional $1.4 million plus. It's an emotional issue. The clergy, if you wanted to know the truth, and I'm sure that they would agree with me, and I see some of them in this room today, would rather we go back to the days when we had no whiskey sold in the state of Alabama, or no wine sold, or no beer sold. They would rather go back to the days of prohibition. And certainly that might not be all bad if this, in fact, is what the people of Alabama want, or if this is what the legislature wants.
Standards set out in that definition when they entered into their franchise agreements, and that is a perpetual franchise. Good cause standard on termination and non-renewal.
On the deal, since February the 10th. That publication is signed for April the 23rd, which of course gives me plenty of time to get out of the city.
Now, after we call the roll, away from the counties that presently do not have the option of having wine in their county, destroys concerning alcohol when one drinking bout kills. These are some of the basic facts you need to know. Wine consumption in the state of 95,823 gallons continues to increase in overall alcohol consumption, but
Advertising is zeroed in on it. Gallo got the ball rolling with what they call pop.
The House agreed to fund some private institutions of higher learning from next year's budget, but it wants more time before giving its approval to the more than $1 billion public education bill. The original education budget provides for a 10% salary increase for school teachers over 2 years. The teachers want a 17% increase. The budget gives the teachers a 7% cost of living increase on top of a 3 to 4% increase they expect by the end of the year. Opponents of the governor's plan also criticized the budget for proposing cuts in school lunchroom programs and driver education. They feel the cuts should be made in college and university spending. 11 legislative days remain in the session, and Representative Walter Owen Head of the House Ways and Means Committee warned the lawmakers that time is running out to act on what he called some of the most important legislation to consider this session. Before adjourning, the House passed the private school bills. The appropriations for 5 private schools will receive the same amounts they received in the last session. Tuskegee Institute receives the lion's share of the $2.5 million, getting $1,400,000. From the state capitol, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Well, our coaches, we have 4, I think, excellent football coaches, all with great experience and good backgrounds. And we've moved Coach Paul Davis back over to defense. He'll handle the defensive ends and I think continue to work with the kickers and the kicking game on defense. Coach P.W. Underwood will handle our defensive linemen, our inside people. He has some good prospects and he does an excellent job with them. Buddy Nix will handle our linebackers. We're in the 3 linebacker scheme. And Coach S.E. Sullins will coach the secondary. Those are 4 good coaches, and I think they'll all do a good job, and I'm expecting really big things from that group this spring.
There's word of experimenting some with a 4-man front.
Well, that's right. We're going to do some experimenting. We're not changing our philosophy, but we may vary our alignment just a little bit and see how that looks, and that's all in the hopper kind of. And we're going to start working on that and really see how it looks.
You have to be pleased with John Poole's score of 73 out here in this howling wind country.
Yes, that's true. I think if you had to make par out here today, it would be 75. It really is an outstanding round. I'm disappointed, though. He was 3 under at the turn, and this backside really gave him a hard time.
Had a little trouble on the green.
Yes, I think most of the kids, with the way the wind's blowing, the greens got faster, and then they're large greens, so I think that basically what caused his problem.
How's your team looking? Have you done your arithmetic?
Not quite, but we had 1 score in, and then we had the second man came in with 78, and then John was 73. I don't know how the others are playing, but we're competitive. We feel like we have a good team.
I really haven't followed anything other than what I've seen in the paper about those nominees, and I'm sorry for them that I'm talking about all 4 of the other nominees whose nominations have been held up for so long, because mine hadn't been held up quite as long as theirs.
The U.S. Senate confirmed Hobbs' appointment as federal judge of the Middle District of Alabama yesterday. Hobbs is the first nominee to be confirmed. 4 other positions in the state are still vacant. Hobbs says his 30 years' experience as a lawyer in Montgomery will be invaluable as he moves to the other side of the bench. He'll be working with presiding Judge Robert Varner, who left a position vacant when he took over for former presiding Judge Frank Johnson. Hobbs says it is somewhat awesome to be following in Judge Johnson's footsteps.
I feel a little bit like the nameless baseball player that took over for Babe Ruth, coming in after Judge Johnson. But of course, along with the concern about filling his shoes is the challenge to try to be the kind of judge that he was.
Hobbs says he'll be sworn in on April 14th. Senate confirmation hearings on other judicial nominees are expected to take longer. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Good. Happy Easter day. You get your car fixed around there? How about 3 of them? No. But you gonna pass them out? How long will when they come out? Look, they come out.
This land belongs to James Thomas of Clanton. In January of 1979, Thomas was contacted by the Alabama Power Company about putting a 15,000-volt transmission line across his land. Mr. Thomas told us the power company representative assured him only one tree, if any, would need to be cut in the power line's right-of-way zone. After looking over the property with the power company official, Thomas signed this contract January 23rd of last year. Now Thomas says instead of just one tree being cut, about 60 large trees on his land were felled. He was paid $85. Thomas says his complaints have gotten him nowhere with power company officials. He says they called the incident unfortunate and told him since he had signed their contract, he had no more say-so in the situation. And Thomas isn't the only Chilton County landowner who feels he's been misled. Reverend J.T. Mink of Clanton had 63 trees cut. Another landowner, Mrs. Billy Parrish, says she was told 3 of her trees might have to be cut. This is what her property looks like now.
Landowners say they're not upset about having a transmission line running through their property. They're mad at Alabama Power's method of acquiring a contract. They call it misrepresentation.
They come through here and tell us they're going to cut one tree, turn around and cut 60 trees. And things like this, and cut trees that's unnecessary. As you can see right behind me here, the trees is cut here on the property that no way it could come within 5 feet of the conductors. If it's standing under, and they go way back up in the woods and cut the timber.
Thomas and other landowners took their problem to the Alabama Public Service Commission. In February, a PSC representative met with power company officials in Birmingham. Later, that same PSC representative told me the power company agreed to go back and talk with each landowner to try and settle differences. Thomas says he wasn't contacted after that February meeting, and on March 12th, he and other Clanton landowners filed a formal petition with the Public Service Commission.
A spokesman for the PSC says the landowner's complaint will be discussed at the next commission meeting this coming Monday. As for Mr. Thomas and some of the other property owners, they plan to file suit against the power company, not just for monetary compensation, but to hopefully get new contract guidelines set. Guidelines Mr. Thomas hopes will be fair to all parties involved. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News in Clanton.
This land belongs to James Thomas of Clanton. In January of 1979, Thomas was contacted by the Alabama Power Company about putting a 15,000-volt transmission line across his land. Mr. Thomas told us the power company representative assured him only one tree, if any, would need to be cut in the power line's right-of-way zone. After looking over the property with the power company official, Thomas signed this contract January 23rd of last year. Now Thomas says instead of just one tree being cut, about 60 large trees on his land were felled. He was paid $85.
Landowners say they're not upset about having a transmission line running through their property. They're mad at Alabama Power's method of acquiring a contract. They call it misrepresentation.
Thomas and other landowners took their problem to the Alabama Public Service Commission. In February, a PSC representative met with power company officials in Birmingham. Later, that same PSC representative told me the power company agreed to go back and talk with each landowner to try and settle differences. Thomas says he wasn't contacted after that February meeting, and on March 12th, he and other Clanton landowners filed a formal petition with the Public Service Commission.
A A spokesman for the PSC says the landowner's complaint will be discussed at the next commission meeting this coming Monday. As for Mr. Thomas and some of the other property owners, they plan to file suit against the power company, not just for monetary compensation, but to hopefully get new contract guidelines set. Guidelines Mr. Thomas hopes will be fair to all parties involved. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News in Clanton.
For the first time, home buyers may be able to renegotiate interest rates up or down every few years. It's part of a new mortgage policy approved by the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. All savings and loans authorized by the board can start using the plan immediately if the money is available. Under the plan, the home buyer's mortgage rate is fixed according to the interest rates at that time. Then the loan is secured by a 30-year mortgage. Every 3 to 5 years, the home buyer may renegotiate his interest rates with the company. If interest rates go up, the home buyer's payments go up. But the big plus is that if the rates go down, the payments will go down. Local savings and loan officials say the new policy is advantageous to them since it gives them a way to keep lending money during this period of skyrocketing inflation. The new mortgage policy will be available locally within the next 90 days. So if you can afford to pay the current 16% in interest rates to buy a new home, the new policy may be worth your while to look into. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The worker was wearing anti-contamination clothing, which he had been required to wear in the plant, and that clothing was removed while he was en route to the hospital in a Daniel Construction Company ambulance. They later checked to see if there was any radiation on that. There was negligible surface contamination, and it posed no radiological threat to anyone.
Rabbits shouldn't be the only animals associated with Easter. What's wrong with an Easter puppy or an Easter cat? Lots of cute kittens and puppies are available here at the animal shelter on the Mobile Highway. So come take a look. One of these friendly beasts might become a long-lasting reminder of a very happy Easter. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Hunting for Easter eggs is one activity guaranteed to produce plenty of smiles, no matter whether young or old are searching for the brightly colored objects. For 12 exceptional children, a field at Auburn University at Montgomery was the place to look for the eggs with some help from 25 students. According to the president of the Student Council for Exceptional Children, Terry Chappell, the event was a way for AUM students to help those with handicap.
Basically, AUM just wanted to do something special for the exceptional children here in Montgomery. And we had tried this a couple years ago and decided we'd try it again this year, and we'd like to make it an annual thing for the children around Montgomery.
At Maxwell Air Force Base, 8 youngsters from Father Purcell's Home for Exceptional Children spent much of the afternoon practicing for the upcoming Special Olympics. According to Linda Cummins, activities coordinator for Father Purcell's, the children are planning to compete in the running events, the beanbag drop, the log roll, and a number of other competitive events. Cummins says the group is trying to raise enough funds in the next few months to take 12 children to Disney World. This Easter weekend, the children showed that having a handicap doesn't hold you back from having fun. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
James Thomas of Clanton charges that the power company misled him in negotiations for clearing timber from a transmission line right-of-way. He says they told him only one tree would need to be cut, but instead, Thomas says, Alabama Power cut 60 trees. Today, power company spokesman Bryant Allen refuted Thomas's charges.
Trees in question are what we call danger trees, and before any of those were cut, an independent appraiser, Mr. Thomas and the power company man, walked down that line and marked by tying a ribbon around 29 trees that needed to be cut. Now, after the construction crew went through there, we had cut 31. the appraised value for those 29 trees was $57 plus. We paid Mr. Thomas $85. When we cut 2 extra trees, the total amount we offered him was $235. Half of those, some 30 trees, were given to Mr. Thomas off of the main right-of-way by his request, so his nephew could salvage those trees. 29 were his on his property line that were marked. 2 were not marked that were cut. But of the total 60 trees, 30 of them were ours that we gave to him.
Mr. Thomas says he would also like to see new contract guidelines set. Allen says new guidelines aren't needed.
This is the same contract we've used for right-of-way for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and generally, most of the time, it seems to work, and there's no misunderstandings between people.
Allen says right-of-way construction sometimes results in this type of misunderstanding, but he points out if a mistake is made, the power company makes every effort to rectify it. Sidney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
You're okay. Nobody in that lane. Save a little film for the next week. Why did he stop? Well, no problem here.
Moving. It's moved.
The annual WHHY Auburn University at Montgomery Interclub Council Easter egg hunt attracted more than 3,500 residents this year. According to Student Government Treasurer Jimmy Killian, the event raises money for the AUM Scholarship Fund. Last year, funds provided tuition for 3 students. This year, officials hope to award 4 scholarships. 14 campus clubs and radio station WHHY worked for more than 2 months to make the event a success. To ensure that, they asked for the community to pitch in with prizes and support. The Student Government Association provides the entertainment. Today, it was singer Beth Nielsen Chapman. SGA Treasurer Killian says more than 2,400 boiled eggs are placed out during the hunt, along with 300 to 400 plastic ones containing the prizes. He says the annual Easter egg hunt shows the large amount of community support for Auburn University at Montgomery. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
The governor went to Macon County today, as he had promised, to campaign against a proposal to legalize gambling. He spoke to a mostly black group at the Greater Friendship Baptist Church in Tuskegee. Security was tight, with state troopers, city police, county sheriff's deputies, and the governor's own security making their presence known. Governor James told the audience that nothing good could come from gambling.
Yes, they may say there will be some money generated for some of our public institutions, and that may be so, but at the same time, a few, you can count them on your hands, will get rich. And there's money circulating, blood money circulating in this county right now to set the stage for that.
James says he believes 3 dead black leaders, Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be fighting the dog track if they were alive today. Ronald Williams was in the crowd listening to James. In 1977, Williams was convicted of trying to bribe a state senator in an unsuccessful attempt to bring dog racing to Macon County. Governor James says he has no further plans to come to Macon County to campaign against the dog racing track. However, he says he will be in constant communications with authorities in the county. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News, Tuskegee. Opponents of legalized dog racing in Macon County say gambling will bring bad influences to the county. Those who promote the idea believe taxes generated by the racetrack will help Macon County financially. Governor Fob James says blood money is being spread around to ensure a yes vote. Macon County Sheriff Lucius Amerson says if money's being used illegally, he doesn't know about it.
I don't know of any situation specifically where any money has been used to intimidate anybody or anything like that.
Whatever influence is being generated in the county will be evident when the voting machines are opened on Tuesday. The approval of Tuesday's referendum by Macon County voters will not necessarily pave the way for dog racing here. Governor James says if the vote is yes, then the idea of dog racing will have to face another test, this time in a court of law. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News, Tuskegee, Alabama.
Alliance members say important questions about plant operations, worker safety, environmental safety, and other community safety measures were not answered at that meeting. Today, Attorney Julian McPhillips outlined questions that plant opponents still want to ask the government.
Including storage and burial of these radioactive materials, including discharge of radiation into the environment, including its effect on any population group, particularly the plant workers who will be most affected by it and who will be exposed to radiation there of a level a good bit higher than the normal person is, plant workers' families, area residents, and people living downstream. Also, we want to know the effect on biological plant life up and down the Alabama River where waste will be discharged and in nearby ground areas where various waste will be discharged.
Westinghouse is still gathering facts about most of the areas questioned by the Alliance and is reported to be planning to buy 800 acres of land for the plant. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Governor James called today's meeting just last Friday. Bob Harris, the only board member to oppose Funderburk's selection, questioned whether the board could waive a requirement of 10 days' notice before the meeting.
The legal requirements as fixed by the legislature have not been satisfied.
Governor James passed around a letter to waive the 10-day rule. Everyone but Harris signed. Harris's next move was to nominate former Governor George Wallace for the president's job. That motion died from the lack of a second. It was Henry Stegall who nominated Funderburk. Again, Harris came up with another nomination, State Highway Director Rex Rayner.
Mr. Harris, I received a letter today from Dr. Rayner requesting that in the event that he was considered, that his name be withdrawn. Have you got anybody else you'd like to nominate?
Then came the vote.
All in favor of Dr. Hanley Funderburk, please say aye as I call the roll. Mr. Sanford.
All of the board members, except Harris, voted in favor of Funderburk.
Gentlemen, with great pleasure and pride, I present to you the president of Auburn University, Dr. Hanley Funderburk from Pickens County.
After the vote, Funderburk told reporters that he will work hard to consolidate the support of the Auburn faculty members, despite the fact that the Auburn Faculty Advisory Committee and the Student Advisory Committee didn't support him for the job.
With the selection of Dr. Funderburk as the president of Auburn University, there has been a new problem created. Now there's an opening for the chancellorship of AUM. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at AUM.
Administrators from each of the university's campuses, plus a member of the Board of Trustees and Chancellor Joseph Volker, met in the Chancellor's office to state their opposition to the substitute education bill. The bill would cut almost $11 million from the appropriations going to state colleges and universities. Trustee John Oliver says the board realizes other state programs need money, but he points out that a cut in university budgets will hurt the state's economy in the long run. He also says it's dangerous to place too much emphasis on elementary education at the expense of higher learning. He says university enrollments are increasing, yet funds are declining. In defense of the substitute bill, State Representative Roy Johnson says only 12% of Alabama's high school graduates ever attend college. He He says the bill would give a 10% pay raise to all education employees, and that he thinks citizens are tired of seeing university presidents and chancellors live in what he calls splendid royalty, while school children and teachers go begging. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
We know specifically
The committee added almost $3 million in amendments to the general fund budget before voting 9-3 to give the bill a favorable report. The committee ignored a request from the James administration to withhold consideration of the more than $298 million budget until a decision is made in Washington on the state's $36 million in revenue sharing money. At the urging of Senator Ted Little of Auburn, the committee increased the appropriations to the Department of Pensions and Security from $5 to $7 million for the next fiscal year. The committee refused to take money away from the Commission on Aging and the state prisons to give PNS its increase. Senator Bishop Barron of Montgomery was unsuccessful in getting the committee to eliminate from the budget $1 million appropriated to non-state agencies. Committee Chairman Senator Richard Pearson of Birmingham says prompt attention of the budget by the committee means it could be passed in the current session. He says there are revenue-producing measures coming to the Senate from the House which he believes will offset any revenue-sharing loss and take up other slack in the general fund budget. The budget can be taken up by the full Senate Thursday. The House has not acted on the general fund budget. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
The 7-month selection process was a turbulent one, shrouded with allegations of political involvement by Governor James. One of the largest group of people to be affected by the selection of a new president is obviously the students of Auburn. When we talked to them, most of them didn't seem concerned about the qualifications of Funderburk, but instead the process by which he was selected.
I think I feel the way most of my friends feel, and we feel like it was like Bob James' decision that, you know, it's just his decision and that nothing else would have mattered.
So you think there was politics involved?
Oh yeah, quite a bit.
I think most everybody thinks politics were involved.
How does that make you feel about it?
Cheated.
Dr. Funderburk says doing his job well will overcome any possible divisiveness, but he's more concerned with other matters.
I think that the priority at this point in time has to be with the legislature to see that we get a budget.
Funderburk's predecessor, Dr. Philpott, says he wants to remain aloof from the selection process and won't comment on it. Funderburk and Philpott met for several hours this morning talking about the current status of the Auburn system. As for Auburn's Montgomery campus, AUM Chief Administrative Officer Jim Williams will act as the interim chancellor in Funderburk's absence. A selection process for that post is still to be developed. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News in Auburn.
The Senate's version of the state's education budget provides for a 10% pay increase for teachers. But as reported out of the Finance and Taxation Committee, the budget is about $180 million over estimated state revenue. The state's general fund budget, changed from where it was 24 hours ago when it was $2.5 million out of balance, is now about $100 million in the red. The amended budget gives Medicaid $30 million additional dollars and a budget of $96 million for the next fiscal year. Senator Finis St. John says the Senate is wasting its time not to adequately fund the financially troubled Medicaid program. St. John says pensions and security should be funded at the $9 million level, and the committee agreed. Prisons, he says, needs at least $23 million in conditional money, while mental health should get $20 million conditional dollars, and again the committee agreed. $5.5 million were cut from the education budget and transferred to the general fund. The committee cut $1.5 million from the Commission on Higher Education, $1 million from Youth Services, and $600,000 from the Industrial Training Institute. Committee Chairman J. Richmond Pearson says the education and general fund budget cannot avoid proration, but he says the House will know now what kind of money is needed. From the state capitol, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
James, what are they going to let you do?
Well, I know I'm going to do all the drills, all that, but, I don't know about Henry-wise. I haven't talked to, the coaching and stuff like that, Until then, I'm going to go out and do everything about else.
They are going to let you run the wind sprints and stuff like that.
Oh, yes, I'm going to run that, because, that's me, I figure I can do that much, try to stay in shape, I'm going to lift still, try to get stronger.
Then the idea is that you'll probably do everything except the hard contact work, huh?
I'm not sure, but, I hear, I think that's the way it's going to be, but if it's not that way, I'm all for it,
You think the offense may become more tailback-oriented now that Joe is gone?
It could, because Chelsea and George are really a fullback, like last year, Joe was really tailback. We used to run that way. But the biggest key is our offensive line, all them back, experience, I'm dying to run high on them.
You are?
Yeah, it's super when they have an offensive line like that.
Cooper says an increase in the number of food stamp recipients coupled with possible federal cutbacks could create what he calls a serious funding crisis in the food stamp program. He says in December 1978, Alabamians received $9.3 million in food stamps. That figure has more than doubled to $21 million this past February. Cooper says a cutback in food stamps would not only affect recipients, but also the state's economy. He says the food stamp program has a $1.8 billion effect on Alabama businesses each year. Cooper says if Congress doesn't provide more money for food stamps, the program could suffer severe cutbacks, and there would be nothing individual states could do about it. The commissioner also says there's nothing the Department of Pensions and Security can do about cutbacks in Title 20 funds, which go to the mentally retarded, daycare for children and the elderly, and other programs. Cooper says the department will not have to make as many budget cuts in these programs as he first anticipated. That's because Congress may restore some of the Title 20 money it took away, and underspending in some departments will take up some slack. Still, he estimates $1.5 million must be taken from Title 20 projects. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Alabama's 2 U.S. senators and 6 of the state's 7 congressmen spoke to the joint assembly of the legislature, and they didn't paint a rosy economic picture, especially for the state. The congressmen say a balanced federal budget is at the top of their priorities, but it was clear from each one's comments that Alabama would have federal revenue sharing funds cut as a sacrifice for that balanced budget.
We didn't get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. And we're not going to get out of it just by balancing the budget or by following tight fiscal policy that puts everybody that's productive that I represent in the small business area, in the housing area, in the farming area out of business.
Spending discipline. I think we've got to have it at every level if we're going to come out of our present problems and come out and solve those present problems.
Heflin has also sponsored legislation to change the Medicaid law, an issue that's of vital importance to Alabamians who stand to lose their Medicaid funding. But he told members of the legislature there's not much hope for his bill's speedy passage by Congress. Sidney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
And now it runs down. Plug up some more loopholes, that there are enough loopholes to plug up, and whatever other mechanism we have as a way of...
So wouldn't you say before you can even begin to get to the solution, we've got to find out what to uncover any abuses, if there are any. It may be that there...
A copy of this resolution be sent to Miss Kay with a copy also.
Young ladies that live in my district.
On her election, all those, are there any who are...
Mr. President.
Senator Denton.
I have a resolution.
Mr. President. Even read Senator Little's resolution.
Personality and gracious dedication to others. And whereas Dean Cater has served as national president of
Senator Miller's asked to be added as a co-sponsor.
I would like for the entire Senate to
be
co-sponsor.
Senate, any objection, the entire Senate being added as co-sponsor, seeing none, the entire...
Only 37% of the registered voters in Macon County voted. Of those who did, 2,847 voted no, and 1,972 voted yes. That's more than 2 to 1 against legalized gambling. County election officials say more people usually vote in a county election. Earlier, poll watchers had reported a good turnout. One official explained that by saying the people stayed around the polls after they voted, giving the appearance of a large turnout. Macon County probate judge Preston Hornsby says he's surprised at the vote, not because the proposal was rejected, but because it was rejected by such a large margin.
A lot of people was pretty well quiet, mum about it. Of course, the people that were strong against it really come out in the last day or two, which made quite a bit of difference. They didn't have much to say the last day or two, and the church really went to work the last weekend. They did their job over the weekend, this weekend. And the governor coming up had some influence too, I would think.
A majority of the voters in Macon County have decided they do not want a dog track. If there are those who would like a chance to vote on the measure again, Preston Hornsby, the probate judge, says they'll have to wait at least 2 more years. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News, Tuskegee.
And before me, you see a desk and a typewriter that Miss Kate has used and made famous in over 50 years of service to the people of Alabama. And we're dedicating this and giving it to Miss Kate today. And it's a pleasure. And again, Miss Kate, on behalf of the people of Alabama, from the bottom of our hearts, we say thank you.
And I thank you. I thank everyone. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and I do appreciate this nice gesture.
Could you tell us what are you going to do with the typewriter and the desk?
Well, now wait just a minute.
Miss Kate just says at 52 years, it's her business from now on what she does with it, and I agree with that.
It sure is.
You better get used to that feeling, though. It ain't gonna be long.
Taking care of yourself, get plenty of rest, and don't pay any attention to your husband.
Okay, we'll do that.
Those who supported the dog track in Macon County said gambling revenue would help the county's financial picture. Now that the dog track is no longer a possibility, at least for several years, Macon County is looking to industry for new jobs. Governor James says Macon County and the state have bright futures and pledged his support.
We're going to do everything we can through ADO, personal efforts, my office, to attract payrolls to Macon County and to Alabama. We are dedicated to that proposition. When something happens like happened yesterday, it makes you rededicate yourself with increased vigor and enthusiasm.
Macon County Commission Chairman Lawrence Haygood says he's encouraged after talking with the governor today.
And he's very concerned that the citizens of Macon County will have an opportunity to earn a living by the sweat of their brow, that we can move expeditiously to move those individuals who are on the welfare rolls to the payrolls.
The James administration has stressed an immediacy in bringing industry to Macon County, and already there's talk of a couple of hot prospects coming to visit next week. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
The governor made his remarks at a wood energy conference today at the state capitol. Wood energy involves using residues from the logging industry to produce energy. Forestry officials say there should be a governor's advisory committee on wood energy to recommend ways to develop the new energy source in a financially and ecologically sound manner. The governor says he's usually suspicious of any new government agencies, but that endorsement of a wood energy program is a sponsorship of a resource the state already has. Governor James told legislators and forestry officials it's exciting that Alabama can be a leader in wood energy development in the U.S. Though he made no specific promises, he did say he intends to grease the track for wood energy programs rather than put a yoke on distributors. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
It is a twisted logic that would punish the innocent unborn child.
Proponent and an opponent. Should we call someone
issue group
to declare the fertilized egg a person under HJR 43. I think that this issue will be addressed by a constitutional expert later on in the program. You can ask another question. Thank you.
I'd like to have the attention of all. America has been the existence of God, have gained powerful positions in this land.
Of abortion, and much more true today. Abortion on demand intellect has caused what I would call in medicine a doctrine. Number of patients that have been referred to me after their physicians has told them they should.
So notified my secretary, we have a list of any who
I understand that you have your legal advisor here today, and
I'd like to present that.
I really don't want to comment on what any gentleman may be saying or not saying. I think that everybody ought to know that this election was done open to the point that's probably never been done in this state. I have heard, of course, some people say the governor played politics. Well, I would say that when your own appointees express their opinions, and I urge them to do that, although their opinions were different from me, that if I'm playing politics, I'm doing a very poor job of it.
Almost 17 years ago, Governor George Wallace stood in the door of this building in an attempt to prevent 2 black students from enrolling at the University of Alabama. One of those students, Vivian Malone Jones, went on to become the first black to graduate from the university.
Well, obviously, you know, I had an experience here at the university that was not your normal, everyday type experience. There were some traumatic moments there. And I used that experience, I feel, to really, it added to the depth of my own being, and also it added to my self-worth.
Today's Honors Day celebration marks the 15th anniversary of Mrs. Jones' graduation, and to celebrate this occasion, the Black Faculty's Outstanding Senior Scholar Award has been renamed in her honor, because as one faculty member put it, Mrs. Jones' courage and academic